It's clearly been prepared by Jorden van Foreest. Look at his clock time. He's gained more than a minute from when he started the game. And also look at the speed he's continuing. This idea was revealed recently by Fabiano Caruana in an online game. And white has actually sacrificed a pawn. That's why the evaluation bar is on black side. That's why it says +1 point something for black. And look at white's king, though. It's castled on the queen side. Black's king is castled on the king side. Opposite side castling only means one thing, all-out attack. Trouble, exactly, chaos. And now, look at this last move by Jorden van Foreest. He's almost moving without using his hand. You can see there, he's just super relaxed. He studied this before, maybe even with the likes of Magnus Carlsen. And now, the idea is clear. White is going to throw his g-pawn up the board in front of that white rook, and he's just going to go for the black king. It's all or nothing now. It's that type of chess from white. He's a pawn down. Long term, he's simply lost, but he's going all out on the attack.
Yeah. And this type of position is so disconcerting for David Navara because it's a very sharp position. That's the first thing. Second thing, Jorden is just blitzing out the moves. So he's in his preparation. And the question is, do you play the most natural move? And this move that David Navara has played is not the most natural move. It would have been way more natural just to stop that pawn from advancing. And here it comes. It's a pawn storm. That pawn, the g-pawn, is about to march one square forward and start opening some lines. And remember, when you are attacking the king, you want to open up those lines. Why? Because you want to have open area so that the pieces can hop in and create those mating threats.
In all honesty, I would be absolutely terrified here as black. This is, I mean, I love chess. I've been playing for 25 years, but this would be one of the most scary opening positions I would have ever faced. And I can't imagine Navara. I mean, he looks super calm, but he's facing not just Jorden, but Jorden's computer, Jorden's coaches, everyone who's studied this position with Jorden before. And also, it's the type of position where you could just get checkmated as black in the next 5 moves. White's pawn that has just moved, if it moves one square further up, the white rook will open, and it's just checkmate. The black king is going to be defenseless. And I saw this game that Caruana won recently, one of the world's best players, and it just happened like that. He won in 5-10 moves from this position, pretty much, just by going for that black king. And if you look at black's king, it doesn't have too many defenders around it. The knight is nearby, but if the knight has to fight against the white queen, the white rooks, there's no chance. So the evaluation bar might say it's roughly level, but that's with perfect defense from black. And white's attacking plan is so straightforward. He's just going to throw everything towards that black king.
There's no way that this position is level, David. Yeah. I mean, just forget the bar. Whatever, when the kings are on the opposite side of the board and the queens are still on or the rooks are still on, no, this is not equal at all. I mean, you just look at David on the camera. He's shaking his head. He's even kind of, is he laughing, grimacing? Yeah. I can't quite make it out. He's uncomfortable. And I've been on the receiving end on this kind of pawn structure because of a line that I play in the Caro-Kann. And I can tell you, it is so scary. Ooh. And that pawn is one square away from opening up a line, and the white rooks are bearing down towards black's king, and the white queen is easily going to be able to switch sides and look at the king. It's terrifying. And but the good news is, we are not the ones playing with the black pieces. Yeah. We are just spectators, and we can just sit there and enjoy the game.
But what would you do?
What would I do? Well, that's not something we need to concern ourselves with because it looks terrible. I honestly don't know.
I would try the F-pawn one step, but
I was thinking the F-pawn as well, but unfortunately, it's on the same. The king is on the same line as the bishop.
The bishop, yeah.
And this would mean that the d-pawn could move one square forward, take a pawn, and it would be check. And
but maybe giving back a pawn is the best way. At least now, temporarily, you've prevented white from opening up this line, as we mentioned, towards the white king. You gain some time as black by hitting the white bishop. I like it.
Yeah, but also the queen will be a bit more hampered, right? So, because you move the pawn and blocking the queen a little bit.
Yeah, you've blocked the queen, and if white has to spend a move retreating this bishop, then at least you have a little bit of breathing space. For example, if the bishop drops back here, okay, black has a few moves you could capture with the knight, and at least you've survived. If white wants to just completely blow open the g-file and push this pawn forward, it will come at the cost of a knight. At least now you're defending everything. You have closed this line temporarily, and I don't think white has enough in order to sacrifice here. I think maybe white can try this, but pushing a pawn forward. But at least you have something to cling on to. Black has an extra knight. I think this might be the best chance, at least in practical terms. As you mentioned, Akira, just pushing this pawn forward. Otherwise, I mean, if you get greedy, if you take a pawn in the center first, I think white might even just ignore his bishop and just blow open the position, pushing this pawn. And it's all about this rook. If it can break through to the black king, it might be checkmate shortly. And yeah, it's just that type of position. This is a monster threat pushing forward. It needs to be stopped.
And it's used 4 minutes, 4.5 minutes.
Yeah.
I think it's a psychological kind of shock as well of, I mean, this is 1 e4, e5. For black, it's supposed to be the most solid opening in chess. And after 15 moves, you're facing such a scary attack.
Yeah. Well, but at least David Navara, he's been on a roll. He's won 3 out of the 5 last games. And he is in... oh, we have the move.
We have the move.
Nice, Kira.
And it was suggested by Kira, yeah.
Fantastic. All right, I'm just going to quickly go through the standings. So these are the standings before round 11. Liam Leh still in first place, Magnus Carlsen in second place. And the players now fighting intensely to be inside top 8. We have Ding Liren just about inside, David Navara as well. He is in that crucial 8th place. Jorden van Foreest in that 6th place. So this is an important game between these two. They are lurking around that crucial 8th place Vidit and Pragnananda just outside fighting to get in. So is Eric Hansen. But wow, Kira.
Yeah, but still, you know, he did my suggestion, but the bar swung the opposite. So I'm not sure that was the best
But the
one.
computer's really materialistic.
Yeah.
So sometimes, you know, you've got to look at the position from a practical human sense. And one of the things about computers, especially when you have an engine such as this, and maybe not with the really, really great engines, is that they only calculate up to a certain move, and they're just like, oh, yeah, it's okay, 10 moves ahead. But on the 11th move, it probably isn't okay. So it depends on the depth. But the super computers, they think in a different way.
Yeah, they have deeper horizons, for example. And actually now AI has got involved with chess. So AlphaZero, which is maybe the most famous AI program, it started beating the kind of strongest human programmed computer. And that doesn't actually work in +1, +2. The AI programs work in percentages. They say if they play themselves 100 times in this position, they would win maybe 65% and stuff like that. And I was going to say, without this move, maybe black would have been okay according to man-made computers, but I think AI engines, they would have seen that, okay, white would have had 65% chance of winning with an attack, or maybe an 80% chance of winning with an immediate attack. At least now, maybe white will win, maybe white can just grab a pawn back and the game will go on a long time. But in human terms, it's better to just survive the next 5-10 moves and take the fight later in the game. And look at this. Also, it's made Jorden think. So maybe not the top computer move, according to some engines, but in practical terms and human terms, it's by far, I think, the best move. And yeah, well spotted, because the #1 priority was to stop white opening up this G file.
And David, you mentioned AI and computers, and I do have to share with you some selfies, because the next one is so cool. Dwayne Tiller is watching the Charity Cup in the metaverse. How cool is that?
Whoa!
I've never seen anything like that. I've heard a lot about the metaverse, but yeah, this is so awesome. And okay. And he didn't capture the pawn. Instead, he introduced a knight into the center. Nice, interesting move from Jorden.
Yeah, and made after a couple of minutes thinking, and that's what might happen. I mean, the evaluation bar swinging back to black's side. Black is a pawn up after all. And I just think Jordan's influence, working with someone like Daniel Dubov, just wanting to be a pawn down in many positions, not giving any time, not wasting a move, capturing a pawn back. I think that's, in general, a good thing for his chess. But here, the white knight, yes, it looks good. It does feel like it's going in the wrong direction slightly, though. And anywhere that white knight wants to jump into will just get captured by black's bishop. So, OK, interesting move. I guess he wants to maybe free up the white f-pawn to step forward. So maybe the white f-pawn will step forward, and then the white g-pawn. It's a bit slower, though, than it previously was, the attack for Jorden van Foreest. And Navara will be much happier now that Jorden did spend a couple of minutes on that move. He knows he's no longer maybe facing pure homework and purely the computer suggestions.
Does he have any sneaky ideas as well? For instance, just because I saw it, knight takes pawn. And look, maybe it looks like it could be an active move. Maybe he has the idea of playing knight takes pawn himself.
Interesting. So we always talk about looking for checks and captures first. The idea is that now you've opened up the white queen. So after bishop takes knight, a recapture, you can actually recapture with your queen with a double attack. And still very complicated here. It's not clear what would happen, for example, if black just threw the king out the way and now white's queen is offside. There might be some nasty checks, a counterattack now against the white king. But either way, that is maybe one idea that slightly scares the opponent. It's the type of thing you at least make your opponent burn time calculating. But in the current position, David Navara did not feel brave enough to capture this pawn. Instead, he blocked things up. So he's trying to now at least lock in this bishop. This bishop no longer has a direct path to the black king, and also gaining some time against the white knight. As mentioned, the white knight, if it jumps forward, it wants to jump forward, of course, with a fork, a double attack, but now it would just get traded off for black's bishop. And suddenly, yes, this is a far advanced pawn, but white's bishop is blunted, and black now can continue gaining time, and suddenly white's attack has lost all its momentum. So I don't think white wants to see any trades. I think in this position, we'll see the knight retreat, if anything. If Jordan's feeling really ambitious, maybe we'll see him throw pawns up the board, but I think he has to take a time out to save his knight, and he has done. He steps it back. So still, Jordan's idea is to push this pawn forward and then push the pawn next to it. It's still about opening up lines for the rook. Just takes a lot longer now. And meanwhile, black has a couple of moves to counterattack, and he starts that by moving his rook across. He's trying the pawn storm on his flank, and it's very much about going for the opponent's kings and whose attack will be quicker. And this is definitely the type of position where we should ignore the evaluation bar, because it's, it's so irrational, this type of position. It's hard for a human to handle.
Yeah, I mean, I just wonder about David's last move, because I thought maybe it might be too slow.
It feels slow.
It does feel slow, right? And I thought maybe it might have been worth just giving up a pawn instead of preparing this push. Just open up that line anyhow.
Yeah, it comes at the cost of a pawn, but you do get an open line for your rook, and you gain a bit of time against white's bishop in the process. So yeah, that would have been really interesting, Ivanka. And meanwhile, yeah, this move, yes, it prepares. Oops, sorry, it prepares this pawn push, but even if that happens, I think if white now pushes this pawn forward, even if this happens, white's bishop actually finds maybe an even better diagonal anyway. So, okay, let's see how the players react. Who is going to be quicker in this race of attacks? That's the big question.
All right. Jorden van Foreest and David Navara, both inside top 8, but they're not safe to qualify for the knockout stage. Tomorrow will be the final day of preliminaries, and David Navara almost smiling when Jorden makes that bishop move.
Yeah, I think he's just smiling because he's being surprised on every turn. I'm surprised as well. That bishop, it was about to get attacked, but he retreated it anyway. And maybe just doing it in a different order to the one we assumed. It's kind of a preemptive strike there. And white's bishop does indeed find this long diagonal, this new diagonal that I was mentioning. White does have an idea, a sneaky idea now, of lifting the white queen up one square, lining it up with its bishop, and then creeping in to deliver some nasty checks to the black king. If you look at this light square diagonal that white's bishop is sitting on, some holes there in black's camp.
What a game.
Yeah, what a game. And this is what we love. There's nothing more exciting in chess than opposite side castling, because then it always ends up in chaos. Some mutual attacks. And, okay, look at this. Navara stopping the white queen from stepping up one square onto the light square diagonal. And now Jorden, look at this, the evaluation bar just yo-yoing, can't make its mind up.
No, it certainly can't. I would be tempted if I were Jorden, just continue with the plan. You know, they have that saying in chess, the person that strikes first, and then it continues, and I've forgotten the rest of it.
I don't know that phrase.
Oh, okay. Well, something about the person who strikes first is always...
has the most thirst.
Yeah, it doesn't quite go like that, but you know, will often gets in the first blow, right?
So it's not a rhyme.
First is not the worst. I don't know.
It's not the worst. No, it's not a rhyme. It wasn't a rhyme, but basically you should be the person
We only
to
do
strike
rhymes,
first.
Ivanka. Remember, we only do rhymes.
My bad, my bad. But you know, the general rule is you should be the one who strikes first, because you've got to be the one that has the momentum, because then, You know, if you land the blow, you open up a line, chances are that here he goes. Pawn pushes, and as David's highlighted several times, White's plan is just to pick up Gary the G-pawn, move it up one square, and activate the rooks.
Yeah, and it's consistent, right? And in general in chess, you can't just change your mind on every turn, kind of start one plan, then switch to another plan, then go back to another plan. You just have to be consistent. They do say that having a bad plan is better than having no plan at all. So here, whether or not it works, I think this is a good idea from Jorden van Foreest, just throwing all the pawns towards black. It's also scary. Remember, psychology is so important. And Navara also quite a lot lower on the clock, 5 minutes down compared to Jorden. It's scary to face all of the pawns rolling towards your king. And meanwhile, black's pawns, yes, they're quite far advanced as well on the other side, but they lack pieces backing them up, and they still take a while themselves to open up lines.
And you mentioned Gary the G-pawn. Jovanka, do you have names for the pieces here?
No, actually not. No.
Isn't that a good
like pet names?
Yeah, like Harry the H-pawn, and we also have Alice the A-pawn. And I guess for kids, I mean, for your 4-year-old, that's an interesting way to learn.
Yeah, maybe that's good pedagogics.
Yeah.
I'll try to
Be careful with that, because I once was teaching a very young boy. And I said, you know, he said to me, well, why does it have to be Harry the H-pawn? I said, fine, name it what you want. And he goes, Lucifer. I was like...
Lucifer the H-pawn.
I was like, OK, well, we'll run with that, but I hope no one is hearing.
That's the fun thing about kids, the creativity, right?
Yeah.
We should maybe stick to the rhymes where, like, doubled pawns are troubled pawns. Actually, something that we learn from. Names can be tricky.
Yeah.
But yeah, talking of tricky, this position, look at this. Black's pawns continuing to advance towards the white king. White's pawns advancing towards the black king. And Jorden didn't even flinch. He just ignored black's attack. He's going all out on the king side. And wow, the pawns continue advancing. The evaluation bar might say it's level, but this is anything but level. This one is going to end up with a decisive result, surely.
Wow.
I think a draw is by far the least likely now.
I didn't expect David to be so bold. I mean, I really thought that maybe he'd move his knight in and try to create some defensive possibilities along the 7th row. But this is brave stuff. I mean, is he going to continue, or is he...
Talking of bold, White has just sacrificed a piece. White's bishop now can just be captured by a pawn. And the black king, it's really... There we go. The bishop had to be eliminated. The bishop was actually a good attacker on this diagonal. And yeah, the black king is just fending for itself. Jorden, look how he's leaning in. His instincts tell him there's a checkmate. For example, White, starting with White's rook going up and capturing the pawn in front of the black king. But at least for now, the black king can hide in the corner. And we have to investigate, right?
Definitely.
Because this one... I mean, this one is just fire on the board. And in this position, the reason this bishop was captured rather than this pawn, it looks like black's about to make a new queen. It's actually unstoppable making a new queen on the next move. But unfortunately, after rook takes pawn check, the king hiding in the corner, now we see why the bishop had to be eliminated. The bishop actually supports this check from afar. So the king would be forced back to a square where it's vulnerable. So the bishop had to be eliminated, and it was. And now Jorden, instead of taking the pawn with the rook, which would have actually been maybe a mistake, because now there's no way to continue checking the black king, instead he captured this pawn with his own pawn. So now, first of all, big threat of winning a rook for free and making a new queen in the process, but a secondary threat, for example, if the rook moves, and I think it must, of just pushing your pawns quietly and trying to deliver checkmate to this king with some pawns, at the very minimum, trying to make a new queen. And this one is still going to be mightily scary for black. Maybe you can stop it either by blocking with your king in this position, planting the king on the edge of the board, or maybe more likely by putting your bishop on this square, just keeping an eye on the pawn advance, but still super scary. If the white queen can somehow join the action, then it's just going to be game over. But in the meantime, the black king hiding in plain sight, and it definitely feels like these pawns are kind of double agents. White wants to just give them away in some circumstances in order to open up the white rooks. We could see a situation, for example, of the pawns, sacrificing themselves and just opening things up, luring out the black king. Meanwhile, David Navara...
But the bar, David,
the bar is
hates it. It hates it. It says it's winning for White. Where's the win?
Wow. So, White's next move has to be just pushing this pawn up. Actually, this threatens checkmate in one move. So black has to block now. For example, if he brings his bishop out, maybe the idea is the same, but black's rook is on the wrong square. This square may be needed as an escape square for the black king. Maybe he should have put his rook here earlier, because now after a check, takes, and now look at this, Jovanka. Queen takes pawn, sacrificing the queen, hitting this bishop as well. And if the bishop gets tempted to take the white queen, checkmate. I think this is just winning.
Beautiful.
I think this was missed by David Navara, and this wouldn't be checkmate if this square was available to the black king. He's blocked in his own king with his rook, and I think white is winning now. Jorden, he's going to find it surely after this pawn push. Next move, he's just going to throw this forward no matter what. And meanwhile, if the black king blocks, then maybe a few different ways for white, but one could be just slowly bringing the knight back. Just next move, taking this, and delivering a nasty check. Now, the reason I say this one is because you want to stop the bishop coming out to block the diagonal.
And once again, that rook should have been on the 8th row, because then the piece could have blockaded that particular square.
The rook would love to be back. It's just on the wrong square. And David Navara, I think it's the time. And let's go back to the players, because now white pawn's rushing forward. Navara scratching his head. He's panicking. He's a great attacker himself, Navara, but one thing I did notice from studying his games is he doesn't like to be attacked. And Foreest is just doing everything. This is beautiful attack from white so far. And still needs finishing touches, though, we should say. It's still not completely over yet.
Jorden van Foreest, he is, we must say, he's on a roll. He won against Ding Liren, and he almost won against Magnus Carlsen. That was a draw, though, and this one now probably a win for him. Fantastic. Is there still a lot of play left? I mean, they only played 24 moves.
Yeah, still some. Navara just needs to now make it as difficult as possible for Jorden. For example, force him to find this beautiful queen sacrifice and going for this checkmate idea, or force him to do something a bit clever. Personally, I would probably block this with my king. I'm too scared to allow white to open up the H file as well as the G file. I just want to block both pawns. But yeah, it just feels to me this is Jordan's type of position as well. He's played to his strengths in this game, and he's also played against the opponent's weaknesses.
But I have to say, I was just checking the computer analysis, because I wanted to see how fine a path does Jorden have to tread in order to find the win. If you do block the pawns with your bishop, it's only one way to win, and that is the line that you've highlighted.
And he's gone for it. He's trying to use his bishop to cover this diagonal, but the problem is for white, just by process of elimination, you can get there. The one thing you don't want to do is give black one more move, because black's bishop, if it does drop back and blockade these two white pawns are never going anywhere, and therefore you can't open up the white rooks. So in a way, you have to give up one pawn in order to open up your rook. And look at Jorden just calculating now. Yeah. Just head in his hands, trying to work out the checkmate. He's got nearly 10 minutes as well in a completely winning position. This is where we talk about time, saving it for the important moments.
Yeah. Well, another clock that is ticking is the auction. Now less than 30 minutes left, 26 minutes left to make your bid for the Tinky Winky costume. The highest bid, $123. You can make a bargain at the same time as supporting UNICEF's important work in Ukraine. So cctauction.com to make your bid for Tinky Winky costume, worn now twice by David Howell in this studio. And it would be sad to see it go, but
it's for a great cause.
It's for
right?
the best cause.
And every penny will go to the UNICEF.
Yep.
And and it's also a moment in history, you know. It's not every day that David Howell, the legendary English grandmaster, finds himself in a Tinky Winky costume.
Yeah.
I promise we'll wash it first, you know. It's a very warm costume.
Oh, but it's such a cool costume. Tinky Winky, you guys. So cctauction.com, 25 minutes left in that auction. So go ahead and make your bid. Clock is ticking for Jorden van Foreest, but there is no drama on his clock. David Navara, on the other hand, he's in big trouble on the clock and, more importantly, on the board.
And now it becomes like a will he, won't he find the solution that David's highlighted. It's the only way to win the game. And that's
really?
I'm just taking at the...
Feels so winning this position. So, OK, a fine line that white must tread, and that involves starting with queen takes pawn, sacrificing the queen.
My bad. There are two ways to win. A second way is perhaps a little bit more natural than queen takes pawn, which is actually just play rook takes bishop.
He's found that way, Jovanka. So he's actually given up the white rook. But look how he's brought the black king out of the position, out of its hiding place. And white's queen now threatening to step across. White's queen joining the battle on the second rank. That's going to end in checkmate. White can just swing the queen across. What can black do? I think black might have to, at some point, give up his queen by... OK, there we go. Checkmate, and one was threatened, the queen zooming up to the top of the board. Now, after a rook trade, white's knight is going to deliver a deadly check, a deadly fork. And Navara continuing. But look at this. That's a fork. Black's queen is going to be captured as soon as the black king moves out of check. Also, the attack continues. Black's king is never going to be safe. So material advantage incoming for Van Foreest and checkmate possibly on the board. White's queen can now even give a check. You don't even need to go and capture the black queen.
Yeah, you can check on the diagonal as well. So that's force the black king back to the very exposed right side of the board.
Yeah, and diagonal checks. Just remember that, everyone. Queen endgames, diagonal checks tend to be the most effective. I don't know why it is. It just stops the enemy king running away. I've struggled to find logical explanations for it, but every practical example I face, I even had queen endgame recently, diagonal checks. And now black's king really struggling to survive, but at the very minimum, there's the simple path of capturing the black queen with the white knight. And the white queen against the black rook and knight, it should be easy. The rook and knight as well, not well placed at all.
And black's pawn structure is also in tatters. And if you're thinking about establishing a fortress like Magnus Carlsen had in the last game, forget it. Look at these pawns. None of them are connected to each other. And there you can see queen checks, and one pawn is going to drop off.
Yep, the pawn next to the white queen, captured. OK, at least black is trying his best. He's trying to make it complicated by grabbing the white pawns now. But once the white queen moves out the way, if Jorden wants, he can just start grabbing pawns with his king as well. The white king can grab the pawn in front of it and start marching up the board to start taking the remaining black pawns. And also, it's all about pass pawns in these situations. And after this retreat, white's pawn now on the F line can continue marching up. And that black knight is pinned. It's ready to be captured. And, OK, black's king trying to do a bit of a dance to dodge this attack. But here we go. I think that's the killer blow. And David Navara leans back. Now, the black knight, if it captures the white pawn, the white queen will just slide back one square, and it's a double attack. That's a check, and the black knight will fall.
On the diagonal.
Yeah, always.
Just as you mentioned.
It's always the diagonal. It's harder to block for the opponent's pieces, simply. And the black knight, once it falls, that will cost black the game. I think we're about to see a result any moment. Will David Navara resign, or will he continue fighting? As Ivanka said, no fortress, because black's pawns are just too weak. And we're waiting for that result. It's hopeless now for black.
Jorden van Foreest, he really has a very entertaining style of play, and this win, which is probably incoming, will take him to currently third place.
Yeah, but Navara not resigning, that's good. That's less of everyone at home, especially the younger players. You only learn about endgames, you only learn why you're losing by keeping the game going as long as possible. If I had $1 for every playable position I'd resigned, and then looked at the computer and it says 0.0, oh, I'd be a rich man. But OK, this one is, however, hopeless. It's just a matter of time. White can start bringing his king into the game now. The black rook is not a sufficient rival for the white queen.
And just a bunch of really interesting results in this round. Vidit has won his game against Jan Christoph Duda. So Vidit is now currently in 5th place, fighting his way into the knockout stage. Liam Lea, as we mentioned, he won his game against Erik Hansen, his 8th win so far this tournament, Liam Lea. Incredible stuff. Hans Niemann, an important win for him against Leiting G. Hans Niemann had a great first day and is fighting to qualify. All right. Are we inching towards that win for Jorden?
Yes. The white king can simply step up now. White's queen can give as many checks as she wants, just to annoy the black king. I'm not sure what else there is to say, unfortunately. The problem is, as soon as the black pawn starts advancing, the other pawns will drop. White's king, once it joins the battle, will start kind of forcing the black king back until the back rank, and there will be checkmating ideas later. The queen just has too many checks at its disposal. And there we go, the king advances. And if black's central pawn marches down with a check, the pawn next to it drops off. So, yeah, not too much hope left for Navara. He runs away with the king, and now white's king is going to occupy the central square. There we go, blocking the black pawns. And it's a matter of time before the black pawns start to drop. The black rook is overworked, trying to defend everything.
All right. Well, as we see a few more moves in this game, Kira, I wanted to ask you, because I see some questions on social media as well. UNICEF is obviously working other places as well, not only Ukraine. What is happening to the work in other countries. How many other places is UNICEF putting up work? Because, of course, other places in the world need help as well.
We work all over the world.
Yeah.
And for the last couple of years, we have worked with for the last year, we worked with to vaccinate against the COVID-19.
Of course.
Because UNICEF is the largest vaccinator in the world.
Wow.
And so UNICEF has taken the role of bringing out all the COVID-19 vaccines on behalf of this international collaboration called COVAX.
I heard about it.
So the aim is to deliver 2.5 billion vaccines. But it is taking time.
Yeah,
I mean, there are a lot of poor countries where we still haven't reached more than 10%. Because it is logistically very complicated, and also it's very costly. So we also need more funding into that system.
Yeah.
So, but slowly, that's also going ahead.
And that work continues, even if a lot of resources now is put into Ukraine and the neighboring countries.
Yes, definitely. But you also have vaccinations against polio. So because we need to end polio for good. So we are trying to aiming to vaccinate 7 million people in Afghanistan. So we have managed to get started with that. And polio is a disease that actually has resurfaced in Ukraine.
Wow.